I'm an engineer. Some of my friends would actually call me an engineer. I do a lot of, in the satellite communication business, we use a lot of conic shapes, a lot of primitives, a lot of ellipses, a lot of parabolas, a lot of hyperbolas. So anything that is a conic type equation, math is a shape that I've been playing with for all my professional career, and it's just has migrated over to my woodworking. So, Murray, you have the PowerPoint. Let's go to the PowerPoint and let's start there. Little cartoon I think one of my sons sent me. Yep, I reckon the Woodturners are back in town. The sawhorses are out at the saloon. So let's go to the next slide. This is what we're going to work on tonight. We're going to work on a 6-pointed vessel from a cube. Some people will look at this and they go, oh, well, you turned around shape and you glued points on it. No, that is one piece of wood. Okay? That's what we're going to work on tonight. Let's go to the next slide. This is what I used to do. Those are 12-meter radio telescopes in the Andes Mountains at 17,000 feet. And so you can kind of see this is one of the ultimate segmented bowls. Okay? That bowl has 264 pieces, petals, segments in it, and aligned to a very precision accuracy. Murphy, let's go to the next slide. All right, so what are we going to talk about tonight? I want to let you know that I, being a new turner, a student of wood turning, as we all are, I am not the person you want to watch or you want to learn from in terms of proper tool technique, proper riding, gliding, surfing the bevel, tool selections, things of that sort. I have not perfected that. I will probably never perfect that. I use what works for me, okay? I use a tool grind that works for me. Some people will probably gonna go, why are you using that tool grind? Because it's what I bought from the various estate sales or whatever, the tools that I have, and it's the way I have learned to grind and probably learned to grind wrong. Your comments to the side after the demo are very much appreciated, okay? But if you're looking, and what I want to give you tonight is the techniques on how to start, how to process, and how to begin this process. We are not going to finish a bowl. We are not going to finish a hollow form tonight, okay? I want to give you the foundation to get there. So let's, next slide. So we're going to talk about size selection. We're going to talk about preparing the cube. And one of the things you have to do if you want this to work out right is you have to start with a cube. A cube is 6 sides, parallel and perpendicular to each other. How many legs is it? 12 legs are equal length. You need every angle between every side 90 degrees. The first one of these I ever put together, I slapped a block up on my bandsaw. I do most of this on a bandsaw, and I ripped what I thought was a perfect cube, and I put it on here, and it was the most out of square block. So one of the things you have to understand is how to get a cube out of this. And my demonstration piece that I like to use is a die. And I unfortunately had that in my garage with the door open last week, and it rained on it. But in order to make this a cube, I've built a sled. I've got a runner for the raceway. I use a bandsaw. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to keep bouncing you back and forth. Go one more. If you have not tuned up your bandsaw recently, I suggest you go to YouTube, look up Alex Snodgrass. Alex is a salesperson for Carter Tools, And he's not trying to sell anything in this video, but he will teach you how to tune up your bandsaw so you got the proper tension in the blade. You've got the table of the bandsaw perpendicular to the blade, and he makes it look so effortless. It's a very easy video to follow, and it works great. But you have to have your bandsaw or whatever saw you're using, you have to have the table perpendicular to the cutting blade. So I build my sled. I haven't found any square trees, so you got to make one, okay? So the first thing I do is I just pick a side and I set the block on the stop, and I run it through the bandsaw. I now have one side that is flat and true. I now want to make that face on the only reference I have is the table or the bed of the sled. So I put slide 1 down against that table, and I rip it through the saw. Now I have side 1 and side 2 perpendicular to each other by virtue of tuning my table saw and using the sled. Now I'm going to use my table as a reference, and I'm going to use my backstop as a reference. I'm going to put face 1 down. I'm going to put face 2 against the stop. Look what I have. I've got face 3 ready to rip through the blade. At that point, I now have those 3 faces perpendicular to each other and true. Now we got to figure out how to get the other sides. So I decide what size block I want. I'll just take a clamp. I'll put a clamp in here, clamp a stop block. Now I have 3 references. The table is reference 1, the backstop is reference 2, the distance stop is reference 3. 3 references, 3 reference sides. I've got the green sides cut. I want to cut the red sides. I always want to have the green sides against my references. I want to do that so that I don't compound my error. It's like making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. By the time you get 15 copies deep, you can't read the copy that's coming off the machine. You've got so much distortion, so much error, okay? So I want to put this block down so that I have... It's always tricky figuring this out the first time. And I think I've got my block backwards. Okay. I'm going to cut them out of sequence. But if you look, I've got a green side down against the platen. I've got a green side against the backstop. And I've got a green side against my stop right here. Okay? Now, when I cut through, that actually cuts this side 5, parallel to side 2, it's perpendicular to 1, perpendicular to 3. Okay? Now, if I can get this right, 2 turns. Pitch, roll, and yaw. If you're in the aircraft business, pitch is nose up, nose down. Yaw is wings going left and right. Roll is wing tips up and down. 1 pitch, 1 roll. Do I have red showing all the way around? Yes, I do. If I have red showing all the way around, that means I've got green against every one of my references. I've got green down against the platen, I've got green against the backstop, and I've got green against my distance stop. 1 pitch, 1 roll. 1 pitch, 1 roll. If you've done that 3 times, you have a perfect cube. Or as good a cube as you can get, okay? Now you have used the green against your platen, against your sled, to create the red sides parallel to the greens, perpendicular to the greens. Any questions? Sharon, there'll be a test. Sharon goes, they told me no math would be involved. Okay, So what we're going to build with this cube is we're not going to turn it conventionally. Okay? We're going to turn it this way. That's the way this is going to turn. Okay? Now, how do you put those points into a chuck? Ron says put a stick in it. But before we get there, let me back up just a little bit. Let's go to this, back to the slides. The next question is, how big of a block can I turn? I've got a 16-inch lathe here. Go to the next one. That's my pitch roll and yaw size selection. Go one more slide. All right, this is what we're looking at. We've got a cube, okay? You're looking at the points of it right here, okay? Next slide. When you do the geometry and you start figuring out what the equilateral triangle is and what you're going to spin, let's go to the next slide. If I build a 9-inch cube, it's going to build a 14.7-inch bowl. The wings are going to be 14 inches. People go, how do you do that? How do you take a 9-inch block and build a 14-inch bowl? Very carefully. You put your board stretcher on it, right? So you have to realize that what you're looking at is not so much this edge of the block, but you're looking at the hypotenuse in 3 dimensions and how that hypotenuse swings. And my rule of thumb is basically 9/16. If you want a 16-inch bowl, you want a 9-inch cube, roughly, okay? So if you only got a 16-inch way and you want to move your banjo, don't cut a 9-inch block, because you are going to bust the points off of your bowl. This started out as a 9-inch cube, and I positioned it so that I could move the banjo past this surface. Well, guess what? There's another one hanging out right below it, okay? And after you get this thing thinned down and you start moving the banjo and you hear a tink, you get your CA glue out. And you can see the fracture line on this one if you look close. Not all trees are square, so sometimes you got to make one. That's a block. This is the sister of this block. It's oak. Somebody had some old 2x3s or something in their attic, and so he gave them to me, and I cut them up and tried to glue them together. And I need to true it up. I need to go to my bandsaw and trim this down a little bit. Okay? That one didn't glue up as well as I had hoped. You'll see a lot of fill marks in it. Those are not minerals. Those are pony beads. If you've ever seen David Mueller's exhibit on rings, he uses these little pony beads, little plastic beads you buy at Michael's. They come in designer colors. I run them through a coffee grinder, pulverize them, and make powder out of them. Pack the powder into the grooves, run CA glue over it. It machines just like wood. You get it compact in there good. You get rid of the voids. You get rid of the pockets. It shines up pretty nice. It's not nearly as hard on your tools as minerals are. Just hand that around. Buy them at Michael's. I think they're like $2 or $3 a bag for the beads, okay? Do not crush those beads in your wife's coffee grinder, okay? Buy her a new one and take the old one to the shop, okay? Or your coffee will taste really plasticky. No, my wife doesn't drink coffee, so I didn't have to learn it that she made me drink the coffee. I just knew better, okay? So what we're going to look at is some geometry. What are we going to do? What do we want to make? We get this wood spinning, and we've got points flying out in the air. So let's go to the PowerPoint. Let's go to the next couple slides, design considerations, what we want to start with. So if we look at this, I'm going to show this like it's spinning vertically. You can see one white side, one black side. Okay, you see this point over here in this view. As I turn it, that point comes up over here. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide. That's the plane that the points are going to be spinning in, the red lines. Next slide. As you rotate it, you end up getting this offset shape. Okay, next slide. Anything in the black diamond, when you start trimming this down, anything that's in the solid blue is solid wood. Anything outside of the solid blue is intermittent cut. Who's ever done an intermittent cut? Intermittent live edge bowl, okay. You get a lot of eccentricity. You get a lot of mass off center. You get a lot of vibration. This is pretty neat because you're on the center the whole time, okay. I'll show you when we start spinning. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Next slide. This is a very simple cut of a three-winged vessel. A lot of people are doing three-winged vessels. You'll find YouTubes on three-winged vessels all over the place. This is a cherry. It's a hardwood, and you can see I got a lot of chip out on the trailing edge of one wing. Okay. Well, one of the questions is, well, why don't you set the grain orientation so you don't have that problem? Cutting a cube and trying to spin it, there is no grain orientation. This is like cutting a burl. You're going to be cutting side grain, end grain. You're going to be cutting all over the place, okay? This is one of the problems when you start cutting a hardwood and you start trying to get these dimensions, the wings down fairly small. I like to use fairly green woods. I don't really measure the moisture content to see what they are, but this is not a regular shaped bowl, so if it's going to dry and distort, you're really not going to see much distortion in this, even if you're using a fairly wet wood. Now, I've tried some aspen. I tried keeping all 6 legs of this. I didn't like it. It was a little punkier than I had expected. I kind of quit halfway through, and the pith was in the wood, and you can see it's cracked out on me. I didn't finish either of those pieces. Again, a standard, just a standard 3-winged vessel. Show that one around. Now this one, I decided to just keep the edges flared out. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Next one. Different things you can do. Again, anything inside the solid blue is going to be solid wood. You're going to have the tool engage the full rotation of the block. Anything outside of that area, you're going to be intermittent cut. This particular bowl didn't quite finish it, but rather than going straight out with the edges like I did the first one, I decided to kind of roll them in, just to kind of give you some ideas of what you can do in variation on rolling things in or out. That one, I rolled them in. This one, I decided to do more of an OG shape, roll it in, and then follow it by an outward sweep. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Go back to the PowerPoint. So the next slide. Now, when you want to go to the first one of these I did, I had been watching some of the videos on 3-winged vessels. I had just been to my first ever SWAT, and I saw Trent Bosch and his Vessels of Illusion, and I thought, I wonder if I couldn't put, kind of those two things together. So I came up with, this is the first one I ever tried, and I spun this, did a hollow form. It was really about one of my first hollow forms, and I took it into the den, had a friend come over, and we were having dinner, and I took it to him, and I explained to him how I did it, and I said, I had this spinning, and I cut 3 of the points off and left 3 points on it, and made this vessel. And he kind of looked at it, and he goes, well, you left 3 points and cut 3 points off. What would happen if you left all 6 points? He's not my friend anymore. So I went back to the drawing board. I had the other half of that maple piece and showed him up. I said, okay, this one I left all 6 points. So this was kind of my start and my first endeavor in trying to put together a 6-pointed bowl. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Your imagination is the limit on this. If your imagination is limited, your bowls will be limited. If you can do all sorts of stuff with this, okay? I left the house today, and a general contractor had just come in with a tractor and a box blade and planed off room for my 30 by 40 shop. So I'm excited to get into my shop and experiment some more with this. Right now my lathe is pushed up against the corner and everything else is crammed in front of it, so I can't get to anything. So I'm excited to try new things. I want to try, the next thing I want to try is going the Sammy Long approach and engraving or carving the tips as leaves so that it stands on leaves and it has leaves coming out, and do some piercing in here. Again, there's virtually no limit to what you can do by mixing and matching techniques and methods. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to make chips, how we're going to turn things here. I've got a block. This is mango. I smuggled it out of Hawaii a year ago. I was over there on a job and managed to sneak out with a little bit of wood, and customs officials are still looking for me. The first thing we're going to do is a very basic means of chucking this. And the very basic method of chucking it is actually no chuck at all. To do this, one of the first things I do is take my one-way live center and I knock the point out of it. Okay, so I now have a hollow live center. Okay, I've taken the point out. Before you knock that point out, next time you're in Rockler, Wood World, anywhere, pick up some extra points. Because you will knock that point out, and later you'll go, where did I put that point? You don't have to worry about it if you bought spares, if you can remember where you put the spares, or if you can remember where the movers put your spares before they packed your stuff up. All right, now this is as close to a square as I could make it about 6 months ago. And it was a little green, so it may have shifted a little bit on me, but I'm just going to take the 1 point, I'm going to put it directly into the hollow part of the headstock, and I'm going to bring the tailstock up. Don't want to grip it too tight just yet.